Hello, I am over here and I want to do this video which is about why the British, the answer is why the British genocided some people but spared the Indians, spared the Chinese, and spared a lot of black people. Why did they genocide Tasmanians but not the Chinese in Hong Kong, for example? Why did they genocide the Native Americans of Virginia, for the most part, Pocahontas' people and such, and of New York, and Tennessee, and Ohio, and all the way to Wyoming? I mean, the British Empire's offshoot continued their legacy. I mean, the British in the U.S., practically the same thing as the British before them. So why this inconsistency? This video is to explain that. And this was prompted by an argument I had with some guy over here in the comment section of my video, Gandhi did not free India. Now, if you think I like my own videos, no, I don't. See, if I like it, then it's two, but I'm not going to like it. I don't know who did that. No one wants the truth. Or 100 views, and of course a lot of them are Indians. You mention India, they come to the video. I know you Indians, you like the Filipinos. Then over here, I mean, if you mention the Spanish, I might look at it. But most videos on the Spanish Empire are just superficial and boring, so I don't even bother looking at them. So here he said that the Spanish Empire and the British Empire had similar ideas on colonization. But I said, no, they're opposites. The British saw it fitting to genocide natives, while the Spanish wanted to mix with them. I was generalizing, of course, because there were exceptions, giant exceptions like India and China. I also said, to make it clear, I don't hate all English people. I love England, the land, and I love English people if they're not racists. The same goes for Spanish people. If Spanish people are racist or jerks, I hate them. So I said, Londonistan believes in Muhammad. Your side fits if genociding them. And he's like, when Spain mixes with natives, it's good, but when the British mix with them, it's bad. So he claimed I was a hypocrite. But I was like, Brits don't mix with natives. They genocide them. Ask a Tasmanian. Oh no, you can't, because they're all dead. There's no descendant of any, of pure blood, because the British, in the name of Darwin, genocided them all, considering the missing links. Of course, I could have given a more elaborate response, because I did know about exceptions, but I was talking about these cases of Tasmanians and Native Americans the British genocided. So then he said, the Spanish did a genocide on the Canary Islanders, which I forgot to cover this allegation in my series on the British Empire because the Canary Islands are kind of marginal. I was focused on America and Philippines, which are pretty big on the map of the world. The Canary Islands are so small, it's easy to overlook them. My bad. But I plan to do a video on that to prove that the Spanish didn't really genocide them, at least according to the definition, although it did look like a genocide because a lot of people died. But killing Nazis was also, apparently a genocide, but not really a genocide. Unless people try to exterminate the German race, then it would be a genocide. And then he said, who first made contact with the Native Americans? Well, in northeastern America, in a few dots on the map, the Vikings were the first. Although before them, the Polynesians made contact with Native Americans. Probably. And after that, the Spanish got the lion's share of America, so of course it was the Spanish who made contact with them, but that doesn't mean that they genocided them. As my series on the British Empire being overrated and not the biggest empire ever proves. And then he claimed no nation has clean hands. Of course that's true, but he's pretending that the Spanish were bad, the English were bad, as if on an equal level. He doesn't even mention how much worse the British were. Because they were worse than Nazis, and my series proves that. The British Empire was not the biggest, is the name of that series if you haven't seen it already. So I was like, you're moving the goalpost from the British Empire guys not mixing with natives to modern Brits who do in some cases mix because they lost their old racist ways to an extent. So I was focusing on Tasmanians and Native Americans. I should have mentioned the Chinese and explained that, but I got around to it. So you can pause this to read if you want to read what I say that I didn't cover by reading it here, or what he says. He was trying to say that the British Empire was more influential, but the British Empire wouldn't have existed without the Spanish, and the British were just followers of the Spanish everywhere in the world. And if not the Spanish, the Portuguese. For crying out loud. Iberia number 1. But as God said, many who are first shall be last, and many who are last shall be first. Deus vult. So then I said this. Most English speakers in Tasmania, Australia, and Virginia, Ohio, Tennessee, New York, including Manhattan, which is a Native American name, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Maine, Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, which the British took from the Spanish, before which the Spanish had a sanctuary for Native Americans who fled the racist Brits, as my series on the British Empire proves. So most English speakers there are Europeans, not natives, because the natives were not numerous enough nor rich enough to serve as economic recipients for the British to dominate. As they did the Chinese, your people drugged. I assume you're a Brit because you defend their evil name so passionately. What is your race and where were you from? To see why you're so prejudiced. So this is the clincher. This is why the Chinese, like in Hong Kong, were not genocided by the British, even though many were killed by the British if they fought the British. But why, on the other hand, the British did wipe out Tasmanians? Because Tasmanians were poor and not very numerous. So they were not good customers. But the Chinese are rich, a huge rich country with many customers. That's why. Money is why the Chinese are alive and the Tasmanians are dead. Money and numbers. That's why the British kept the Chinese alive. If they really wanted to, they could have wiped out maybe half of China or more. Even that's a very daunting task for any genocidal maniac country like the British. As for Indians, they were an advanced gunpowder civilization comprised of several different kingdoms, because they were never united until the British put them in one basket. They were an advanced civilization who were seen as a giant and therefore a good market, just like the Chinese, for British stuff. So they were kept alive because exterminating them would be more difficult than exterminating loincloth people. And the British Empire needed slaves of capitalism. Darwin harped a little bit about the virtues of capitalism. He was a fan of that because he was on the bandwagon of racism and British capitalism. The exploitation of the poor by the rich. I'm not a communist. Communism is bad. That's how atheism spread. The virus of atheism cannot spread by reason. It spreads only by violence. Ask the French revolutionaries who beheaded people, who questioned atheism. In South Africa, you see the gradual British extermination of blacks. But being in the giant black continent of Africa, which isn't black in the north, it was not easy to exterminate them due to their sheer numbers. For if the Brits wiped out a tribe one year, other blacks would fill in the vacant lands, unless the British developed those lands first, but that took time. In the steps of genocide, dehumanizing others and comparing them to animals is a part. And Darwin did this for the Crown, paying him to find a supposedly scientific justification for British tyranny and genocide. So then this guy I argued with said, moral distractions. Morality is a nuisance only to the wicked. I didn't distract. As I explained there. So I said Brits had more influence in science, although they were also very much into science fiction. But did Brits discover more lands? No. The Spanish discovered Antarctica, Australia, and Hawaii before the Brits. And a lot more islands and places. The Brits were always second or third or fourth to a land. And what they brought was AIDS, in the case of the United States and Philippines. But what did the Spanish bring? Chocolate. So, let's see. So since he was being dismissive of me, I dismissed him and no longer wish to argue with him here. Now, let's look at this PowerPoint series here to read some stuff. This quote by Cecil Rhodes, which seems legit because it fits the context of his time and who he was, says, "We must find new lands from which we can easily obtain raw materials and at the same time exploit the cheap slave labor that is available from the natives of the colonies. The colonies would also provide a dumping ground for the surplus goods produced in our factories." So voila, straight from the jackass's mouth, the British let certain people live because they needed customers. And the best customers are rich. And lo and behold, the civilized Indians and the civilized Chinese were richer than Tasmanians, who didn't even have writing, did they? Moving on. "In order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from a bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands to settle the surplus population." He sounds like Scrooge. "To provide new markets. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. Having read the histories of other countries, I saw that expansion was everything, and that the world's surface being limited, the great object of present humanity should be to take as much of the world as it possibly could. Africa is still lying ready for us. It is our duty to take it. It is our duty to seize every opportunity of African booty. Shake that booty, acquiring more territory, and we..." I had to. "We shall keep this one idea steadily before our eyes, that more territory simply means more of the Anglo-Saxon race, more of the best, the most human, most honorable race the world possesses. We got to take Djibouti! We got to take Djibouti! I contend that we are number one. If there be a God..." Oh, so it's an agnostic and therefore atheist who's talking like this racist, genocidal maniac that he is. "If there be a God, I think that what he would like me to do is paint as much of the map of Africa British bloody red as possible. I contend we're number one. Just fancy those parts that are at present inhabited by the most despicable specimens of human beings." That's what he refers to races that were more primitive. Despicable. Wow, he treated them like rats. What a piece of shit this British Darwinian was. What and atheists are Darwinians. They follow a piece of shit called Darwin, who wanted all, including the Chinese and Indians, all non-Europeans exterminated. "Most despicable specimens of human beings, what an alteration there would be if they were brought under Anglo-Saxon influence. Look again at the extra employment a new country added to our dominions gives. Remember that you are an Englishman, and have consequently won first praise in the lottery of life." Unless you're one of the Englishmen who's got black all over them because they're a chimney sweeper. Most Englishmen weren't rich even at the heights of the British Empire. Although they lived better than some people. Depends. So here's a Brit dumping opium into a Chinese guy's mouth, which explains why modern China is very anti-drug, which is a good thing. So Brits were just drug dealers and jerks and racists. They made all Europeans look bad. The Inquisitions by barbarians were bad enough, but you guys had to go full retard. Bloody hell!